Everyone, welcome to the third and final session of the Mindful Coping Practice series. I hope you've enjoyed the first two videos in this series, and let's get started on the third one. So again, I'm Jessie, she, her pronouns, and I'm a counselor at the Student Counseling Center. I want to prepare you for today. We will be doing a fair amount of writing and journaling. So if possible, if you can download the student workbook from our website, we will be doing several of those exercises today. If you're not able to download it, if you could have a pen and paper handy, and I will go over some of the questions that will be in the workbook for you. All right, so first to start, we're just going to review real quick the two concepts that were covered in the first two sessions, just because those do apply to where we are today as well. So the first two concepts were recognition and insight. And recognition is the awareness of our unwanted internal experiences or those uncomfortable internal experiences that we're coming in with. And then insight is kind of the awareness of what those internal experiences are trying to communicate to us. So oftentimes it's about what's important to us. We've also talked about how those attempts to avoid or change internal experiences can sometimes make things worse or create a new problem. And then we've also talked about how to practice the reflection of being here in the present moment. Okay, and then today we're moving into the third concept, which is openness. And so openness, that concept is being open to change and moving towards a more fulfilling life. So the first big question that we're going to talk about is kind of this meta question of, if you could choose what your life was about, what would you choose? So this leads us into our first journaling exercise with the question of a magic wand. So if you were to have a magic wand that you could flick and make all of your discomfort disappear, what would be different for you? How would you be different? How would you act different? What would change in your life? So kind of taking a moment to reflect on that. If you do have the workbook, it's on page 10. And if you don't have the workbook, you can reflect on that on some paper. And if you want to pause this video until you feel like you're done with that journaling exercise, you can do that. Right, so now that you've done that journaling about the magic wand, we're going to come together and do another exercise, which will be a mindfulness exercise that I will guide you through. And I'm going to switch screens so you don't feel like I'm staring at you while we do this. And then we'll get started. Okay, so now we're going to do another exercise. Again, we're going to work with the internal experiences that you struggle with. In this exercise, you'll be asked to actively and openly invite into your awareness your unwanted internal experiences so that you may approach them with acceptance and compassion. The idea being that you can then be open to receiving the information communicated to you through these painful experiences. Like the other exercises, this exercise invites you to make space for what you're struggling with rather than fighting it. This may sound counterintuitive or difficult, but let's give it a try through the exercise. I'm going to start with our AGE technique, the focusing of arriving, gathering, and expanding, which if you've done the other two videos, you'll be familiar with. And remember, if it ever feels like too much, feel free to stop doing the exercise. So go ahead and start by getting into a comfortable position where you're sitting. Maybe sitting upright in a grounded and stable position, your arms and legs resting comfortably, and your hands resting in your lap or on your legs, whichever is most comfortable for you. Allowing your eyes to gently close or softly gaze at an object near the floor. Allowing yourself to arrive, taking a few moments to get in touch with the physical sensations in your body, especially the sensations of touch or pressure where your body makes contact with where you're sitting. Becoming aware of what you are noticing as you sit here, being aware of this moment. Then gathering yourself by noticing the gentle rising and falling of your breath in your chest and belly. Not needing to control your breathing in any way, simply letting yourself breathe naturally. Allowing whatever it is you're aware of to just be without needing it to be other than what it is. Expanding your awareness to take in your body as a whole, any signs of tension, any signs of calm relaxation. Just take note of what there is to observe and notice, being aware there's a part of you noticing what you're noticing. Now bringing your mind's attention to what you're struggling with, the uncomfortable internal experiences that brought you in here today. Allowing the internal experiences to emerge into your awareness, allowing space for the discomfort, for the pain, allowing yourself to be present with that experience. Bringing to mind tug-of-war, noticing any doubts, fears, or worries, or resistance you might be having about allowing the uncomfortable feelings to be present. Bringing those experiences into your awareness with a sense of curiosity and compassion, just noticing them, acknowledging their presence, like a curious scientist might acknowledge the presence of information that comes from observing their experiment. Just noticing your experiences without working on them, believing them, or trying to get rid of them. As you remain in the presence of what you're struggling with, asking yourself, what has it been like for me to struggle with this experience? What have I done to control or get rid of this experience? Have my attempts to control my experience caused more distress or problems? What have I given up or put off in the service of wanting to reduce or control my pain? In my struggle to get rid of, reduce, or control my unwanted experience or pain, what have I given up in my life that is valuable? Allowing yourself to gently open up to your painful experience, to your struggles that have been in the service of trying to make the pain go away, and the struggling that has resulted from not living your life. Bringing a sense of compassion to any sensations of discomfort that might show up. Simply being a witness to whatever comes up, recognizing what you observe without judgment. Asking yourself, can I make room for this discomfort, for the pain? Thinking about tug-of-war and asking, can I drop the struggle of trying to make the pain go away? Can I turn myself towards that which gives my life value, meaning, and purpose? Is this something I must struggle with? Or can I openly lean into the discomfort in the service of not being trapped by my thoughts and feelings and in being able to live my life more fully? Now, allowing the discomfort to recede a bit from your attention, not necessarily trying to push it away, but not keeping it at the forefront of your attention either. Just letting it fade into the background of your awareness on its own accord. Returning your attention to your breathing, slowly breathing in and slowly breathing out. Tending to the rhythm of your breath, the coolness of the air as you breathe in, and the warmth of the air as you breathe out. Now, as we get ready to end this exercise, beginning to gradually widen your attention to take in the sounds around you, both inside and outside the room. Bringing yourself back into the room in which you're sitting. Taking a moment to intentionally bring this sense of self-acceptance into the present moment. When you are ready, slowly opening your eyes. Okay, so as you come back from that meditation, just want to take a few moments to reflect on your experience of that meditation. So if you do have the workbook, it's on page 11. If not, you can use some paper and pen to just reflect a little on how that meditation experience was for you. Okay. All right, and as you come back from that, we're just going to explore the concept of openness a little bit more together here. So we want to really make sure to remember that being open does not mean allowing others to abuse us or giving up wanting to improve situations, events, or behaviors that are readily changeable. It means accepting yourself and your internal experience as it is now and allowing yourself space to move forward. So when we think about it, we have two different strategies that we could use for helping ourselves. One is change and one is openness, and we might apply them to different types of situations. So change is a good strategy when we need to address or change something that's outside of ourselves, so something that is not us. So some examples of that would be events, situations, behaviors. And then openness is a good strategy when we're experiencing unwanted or uncomfortable thoughts or feelings or sensations inside of ourselves. So let's talk about when you might select each of these strategies. So some examples. What would be an example of a situation that might call for change? So one example would be if we're struggling academically, is that something that should lead us to that acceptance, or is that something that we might want to look at changing? So maybe arguments for both. So if we think about changing, some examples of change in that situation could be looking at our study behaviors, changing our study environment, asking a professor or classmate for help, some of those pieces. So some of these situations might also call for kind of a combination of both change and openness to both be applied, which is a little more difficult. So in this academic situation that we talk about, so we might think about applying some of these strategies of change that we just talked about. We might also think about the openness to what we're feeling about struggling academically. So that often can bring up our own difficult or uncomfortable internal experience of what it means to struggle academically. So we might be applying the openness to how we're feeling while also applying some of these strategies of change to our external environment. Another example around openness could be if we feel really anxious being around people, but yet we also really value relationships and belonging. We might need to be open to feeling anxious when we are around people. So being open means being completely accepting in the moment without fighting or judgment to whatever internal experience shows up. And we do that in the service of doing what is important to us. So it means we're being committed to a course of action, even when we experience discomfort, because that action is valuable to us. So in that situation we just talked about being anxious around people, well, we also really value relationships and belonging. So we're committing to that action of being able to engage in some of those situations that might bring us a lot of anxiety in order to be committed to that action of relationships. Okay, so we're going to do a little more talking and reflecting on values that are important to us and guide us in our actions. So sometimes it's hard to commit to an action because we don't know what's really important to us. So we can begin by having the conversation about what gives our life value, meaning, and purpose. And these are our values. So one thing to remember is that values are not so much about the future as they are about living in the moment and doing things that embody our personal vision. Okay, so this is the values compass exercise. So it's on pages 12 and 13 in your workbook. So you'll find the values compass worksheet, and this goes over some different life domains where we tend to hold values. And then the next page is where you kind of fill out your own values and what's important to you. And some of these values or areas might not apply for you, and you get to decide what's most important. So you might pick and choose the ones that feel the most important and do more reflection on that. So if you want to pause here and go ahead and get started on that on your own. And if you do not have the workbook, let me pull up the page for you on the values workbook so that you can see that real quick. Okay. So this is the values compass. So the areas are family, physical well-being, citizenship and community, spirituality, recreation, education and growth, career, social relationships, parenting, and partner relationships. So you might think about within each of those, what do you want? What's important to you within that? You know, what kind of relationship do you want? What kind of growth is important to you? So go ahead and take as much time as you need and pause this until you're done with that, and then come back. All right, and welcome back after completing your values compass. Now you have an idea of what's important to you as we continue to talk about this. So next we're going to talk about a metaphor that helps kind of solidify this in our mind of what leading a values-driven life might look like. So the idea is that values and choices are essentially like heading west. So let's say that heading west is a choice that you make. It's something that you value. You pick up your GPS and you start heading west, and you go all the way around the world until you come back to Pacific. The question is, does that mean that you've made it west? Or is heading west something that is kind of a continual thing that you could keep doing? Values are like heading west. It's a series of multiple journeys or a process. So you can always keep heading west. So imagine that having a loving, caring, respectful relationship is your heading west, your personal value. Will you ever get there, or can you always engage in behaviors that move you in that direction? So the idea is that you will continually be engaging in behaviors in that relationship in order to keep moving it in that process. So that being said, there are milestones to let you know you're headed in your chosen direction. Milestones are important because they can help motivate us to let us know that we're on the course that we want to be on. So let's go back to that value of having a loving, caring, respectful relationship. What would be some examples of milestones in that case that tell you you're headed in that direction? Some examples would be that when you and your loved one argue, you're able to do so without calling each other names and with being able to find a compromise much of the time. So each time that happens, you're kind of confirming that milestone of being on the path towards that continual goal. Okay, so what are some milestones for your own personal values? So in creating that values compass for yourself, what are some milestones that would tell you you're headed in that direction of what you really value? So some other questions to consider when it comes to your values are similar to what we reflected a little bit on in that meditation. So one is, in your waiting for the unpleasant internal experiences to go away or avoiding these experiences, are there things that you were giving up in the meantime? Another question is, what do you think would happen if instead of spending that time and energy avoiding or waiting for the unwanted internal experience to go away, what if you were to redirect that energy into living a life that feels more congruent with your values and more in touch with the present moment? How would it be different? What risks would there be? What benefits? So on page 14 in your workbook, there's a space to reflect some on those questions. If you don't have the workbook, you can just reflect on those questions on your own on paper. So take a moment to pause here as you complete that journal entry, and then come on back when you're ready. All right, so we're now at the end of this mindful coping practice series. So through these 3 sessions, we've done mindfulness exercises that include deep breathing, body scanning, and imagery and visualization techniques. We've also gone through the process of the arriving, gathering, and expanding in many of those exercises. We've considered the use of language as a way of shifting our perspective. And then we've also used metaphors to help solidify some of these concepts for us as well. So we do hope that you make a commitment to practicing some of these skills and exercises on your own outside of these sessions. And we also invite you at any time to come back and view these sessions again and practice, because our experience is ever changing. Thank you so much for watching, and take care. Make sure to reach out to us if you need any support as you go through these sessions as well. All right, take care.